Something is standing in the road ahead of you, and it is not moving, and it knows exactly how alone you are out there. 3 true, unsettling late-night horror stories. Story 1. So, this story might not sound super creepy compared to some of the other ones on here, but to me this was probably the scariest moment of my life, and I still think about it all the time. I live in the southern part of my state, and have a summer cabin up in the northern part, which is predominantly forests and mountains, and is extremely rural. One night several years ago, I was heading north to the cabin after work on a Friday. It was about a 4-hour drive, and I wanted to get there Friday night so I could spend all day Saturday up there and Sunday as well, and come home late Sunday for work again on Monday. I had gotten delayed at work, and then after a series of events that of course had to happen when I was trying to get somewhere, I finally got going around 7 p.m. It was probably tokens 10:30 p.m. when I was driving down this super remote stretch of road in the mountains that had streetlights every half mile or so. And as I came around the bend, I saw a guy sitting underneath one of the lights looking down at the ground. Now, we were miles, and I mean mids away from anything. We were in a forest on a mountain, and so why this guy was here, I had no idea. The only thing I could think is that he had been out walking, and it had gotten too dark for him to continue on. Since I'm a bigger guy and don't usually worry about many things, I got concerned for him and pulled over to ask if he needed help or wanted a ride somewhere. It still creeps me out, because I can see it perfectly, but when he lifted his face, he was wearing a mask, like one of the medical ones people wore during the COVID era, and he wasn't just crying, but he was bawling his eyes out. I immediately got even more concerned. Then it dawned on me he was wearing a mask in the middle of absolute nowhere. So I rolled my window down and asked him if he was okay, needed help, all the questions, etc. He just looked at me and didn't say anything. Then he started screaming. And I don't mean like screaming. I mean like shrieking to the point that he was going to rupture his vocal cords. I work in medicine, and so I'm super familiar with mental illness, people having psychological fractures, etc. So my immediate thought was, this kid is having some sort of break, he's obviously not okay, he needs help, etc. So I park my car and start talking to him, letting him know it's okay, he's going to be okay, I just want to talk and hear what he has to say, etc. Of course, my adrenaline at this point is flowing, but my medical training started going into overdrive, and my primary concern was his well-being. He was clearly not in a good mental place, and he was on a mountain, in virtually pitch-black conditions, with the exceptions of sparse street lamps every so far apart. So naturally, I was concerned something bad was going to happen to him. Of course, there is no cell phone service in this area, so calling someone was not something I could do. Anyway, I get out of the car, and am standing by it, just trying to talk to him. Finally, he stops screaming. But he's not talking, just looking at me, staring at me. So I tell him I'm happy to leave if he wants me to, but I'm also happy to sit and talk to him. He doesn't say anything, so I took that to mean he could use the company. That was when I heard rustling from behind him, and that was when 2 other guys, similar in age and stature and build, came out from the woods behind him, also wearing COVID masks. That was when I immediately started freaking out. I was like, why the full tokens nams are there 3 dudes out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, miles away from anything, wearing masks? Despite the super weird situation, the state I live in has almost no violent crime, and it's just not something anyone who lives here ever thinks of, especially in the rural areas. So despite being freaked out, I didn't immediately drive away at that point. Instead, I decided to try and engage with the other guys. I asked them what was going on, and if their friend was all right, since he was clearly an emotional dumpster fire. One of the guys just looked away, but the other one said that yeah, everything was fine and that I should just leave. I don't know why I didn't, but of course I would not survive long in a horror movie. I was super curious at this point as to what was going on, so I tried asking several more questions. I could tell the guy who had talked to me was getting frustrated, but I didn't really pay much attention, because I was still primarily concerned about their friend. That was when he pulled a gun out on me and told me to get the FK out of here and mind my own FKN business. Growing up in a rural state where guns are super common, I wasn't immediately terrified. I was standing there, I was near my car, and my car was still running, although in park. And then I saw the guy look like he was going to take off his mask. That was when it immediately clicked in my head. Right now I couldn't see their faces. I had a gun pointed at me. I was about to see one of their faces. Shun Token's name's T just got really real fast, really real much earlier. But of course, it didn't. So in a split second I was in my car feckin' flooring it. For days after that I was scouring the newspaper and local newspapers to see if any crimes had been reported in the area. I couldn't find anything in any reports or anything in the newspaper, nothing online. So eventually I kind of just let it settle into the back of my mind. To this day, I still wonder what it was that I stumbled across. And thank God my brain finally snapped into shape before I got shot. Story 2. This happened to me just a few days ago, and I genuinely cannot stop thinking about it. I figured sharing it might help me process it a little, so here goes. It was a Friday night. My husband and I had gone on a double date with some friends. Nothing special, just dinner and good company. We had a really nice time and wrapped things up around 10 o'clock. Because I had come straight from work, we had taken separate cars to the restaurant, so we were each driving home on our own. My husband's plan was to swing by his mom's place first to pick up our baby, who had been staying there for the evening. So the arrangement was that he'd grab the little one and meet me back at the house. That meant I was making the drive home alone. Now I want to give you some context about where I live, because it matters. We're out in a very rural part of northwestern Illinois, and I mean genuinely rural. There's farmland in every direction. The roads near our house aren't even paved. They're gravel. No street lights, no sidewalks, nothing. Just packed stone and dirt cutting through fields, and if you're lucky there might be a small house tucked behind some trees or shrubs every mile or so. Otherwise it's open land as far as you can see in the dark. I had the option to take the highway home. It would have been faster and more straightforward. But there's a toll on that route, and honestly I didn't feel like paying it that night. The back roads aren't that much longer, and I've driven them plenty of times. I'm comfortable on them. I just flip on my high beams and take it steady in case any deer decide to wander out in front of me. It's a totally normal thing for people out here to do, so that's what I did. I turned off onto the gravel roads, high beams on, windows up, just making my way home. It was quiet out there the way it always is. No other cars, no lights from houses, just my headlights cutting through the dark and the sound of gravel popping under my tires. The corn on either side of the road was tall, right up close to the edge of the road the way it gets in the summer. It makes the road feel narrower than it actually is. I'd been driving for a little while when I saw something ahead of me. There was a car parked in the oncoming lane with its hazard lights blinking, and the driver's side door was wide open, like fully open, swung all the way out. The open door was extending past the center line and into my lane, which meant I was going to have to slow down or maneuver around it if I wanted to get by. And then I saw the man. He was standing in my lane, not on the shoulder, not beside his car. He was standing right there in the lane I was traveling in, just facing toward me. He looked to be somewhere between 55 and 60 years old, wearing a polo shirt and cargo shorts. He wasn't waving his arms. He wasn't gesturing for help. He was just standing there looking at my headlights coming toward him and not moving. I noticed all of this in the span of a few seconds, and my first thought was that something felt very wrong about it. I'd heard things about these back roads at night. There had been talk around the area about people, sometimes people on drugs, setting up situations to get drivers to stop their cars and then robbing them or worse. Someone would put something in the road or park their car in a way that forced you to brake, and then people would come out of the dark and you'd have no warning and nowhere to go. I don't know if that's exactly what this was, but that's what my brain went to immediately. The cornfields on both sides of the road were right there. Anyone could have been standing just inside that corn and I would never have seen them. So I didn't brake. I just took my foot off the gas and let the car roll forward at a slower speed, coasting. I kept my eyes on him, and I kept my eyes on the corn on either side as much as I could. I told myself that if he reached for something, or if anyone came out of that corn, I was going to floor it and deal with whatever was in front of me. He just stood there. He was staring me down like he fully expected me to stop the car. And I think he was getting more tense the closer I got without braking. I gave the engine a rev, just a quick one, to make it clear I wasn't slowing down for him. That's when his expression changed. He looked genuinely annoyed. Not scared, not confused. Annoyed, like I had done something wrong by not stopping. He held eye contact with me for another second or two, and then he turned around, got back into his car, closed the door, switched off the hazard lights, and drove away down the road in the other direction. And that was it. He was just gone. I drove the rest of the way home without stopping, and I didn't feel okay until I was inside with the doors locked. My husband got home with the baby not long after, and I told him what happened right away. I genuinely don't know what that man wanted. Maybe there's some innocent explanation for it. But the way he stood there, the way he stared, the way he looked annoyed when I didn't stop instead of relieved or confused, I can't come up with a good reason for any of it. If you're driving at night out in northwestern Illinois, please just keep your eyes open. Story 3. This happened when I was 25, living with my housemate Tony and his 13-year-old son Ben. I was working nights at the time, so my schedule was completely flipped from everyone else in the house. Tony would leave for work in the morning, Ben would head to school, and I would come home and sleep through most of the day. It was a pretty simple routine and it worked fine for us. The house felt safe enough. Quiet neighborhood, decent people around, nothing that ever made me feel like I needed to worry. So one afternoon I was asleep in my room, probably a few hours into sleep, still pretty deeply out of it the way you get when you're sleeping during daylight hours. My blackout curtains were doing their job. The room was dark, and I was in that heavy, groggy kind of sleep where you're not quite aware of anything. That was when I noticed my bedroom door was slowly opening. I say noticed, but it was more like I half registered it through the fog of being mostly still asleep. I was lying in bed watching it move, this slow, lazy swing inward, and it stopped when it was about halfway open, just stopped there. I laid there blinking, my brain trying to catch up, still mostly in that useless half-asleep state where nothing feels urgent even when it should. I just assumed it was Tony. Maybe he'd come home early from work, felt a bit off or something, and was checking on me for whatever reason. It was a little odd, but I wasn't alarmed. I called out his name, just said Tony into the dim room, and I heard something, a sound somewhere in the house, not a voice calling back, just a sound, some kind of movement. I waited a second, and when nothing happened, I climbed out of bed and wandered out into the hallway. Still half asleep, not really thinking clearly, just kind of shuffling around checking rooms. The house was empty. No Tony, no Ben, nobody. The front door was locked. Everything looked normal at a glance. I stood there in the hallway for a moment, trying to make sense of it. I talked myself into a pretty easy explanation. My door probably hadn't been latched properly when I went to bed and had just drifted open on its own. Or maybe I'd been half dreaming and imagined it moving and it had already been open. Either way, I was tired. I wasn't thinking hard about it, and I went back to bed. That afternoon when Tony and Ben got home, I mentioned it, just kind of as a passing weird thing that had happened. It wasn't until I brought it up that Ben went to check his room and came back looking upset. His PlayStation was gone. We went through the house more carefully after that and found it pretty quickly. The screen on Ben's bedroom window had been forced open from the outside. Someone had come in through there. When I put it together, I understood what had happened to my door. Whoever broke in had been moving through the house and opened my bedroom door. They must have seen me in the bed, feet visible, clearly someone home and asleep, and they just stopped, stood there for a second, and then backed off and left. Took the PlayStation on the way out, something easy to grab. We figured it was probably some local teenager. The PlayStation made it feel like a pretty opportunistic low-level thing. We filed a police report and were obviously annoyed about Ben losing his console, but none of us were that shaken. It felt like a one-time thing and the person clearly hadn't wanted any kind of confrontation. A few days later was my day off. I went out during the day, just normal errands, grocery shopping, nothing exciting. I was gone a couple of hours. When I got home, I could tell immediately that something was wrong because the house was a mess in a way it hadn't been when I left. They had come back. This time they'd broken in through the kitchen window. I was walking through trying to figure out what was taken and what was just disturbed, and then I went into my bedroom. There on the floor, just inside my bedroom door, was our biggest kitchen knife. The largest one we owned, the one that normally sat in the knife block in the kitchen. It was just lying there on the floor of my room. I stood there staring at it, and my thoughts started going somewhere I really did not want them to go. The person had broken in through the kitchen, picked up a knife, walked to my bedroom and opened the door. I wasn't there. So they put the knife down and went and took a bunch of stuff from the house and left. But what if I had been home? That was the part I couldn't stop thinking about. The first time they saw me asleep and just left without taking anything except the PlayStation, seemingly not wanting any trouble. That made a kind of sense. But they came back, and this time they picked up a knife before checking my room. Why would you do that? Why would you go back to the same house knowing someone is sometimes home sleeping? And this time arm yourself before looking. If you just wanted to rob the place, you'd check it was empty and then take stuff. You wouldn't grab a knife and go check the bedroom first. We didn't even have that much worth taking. Nothing that would make the risk worth it. The whole thing just pointed somewhere really uncomfortable, and I couldn't find a way to think about it that didn't. We ordered security cameras and got them installed as fast as we could. After that, nothing ever happened again. No more break-ins, no signs of anyone coming back around. I don't know who it was or what exactly they had planned that second time. I don't really want to know. I'm just glad I decided to go shopping that day. So to whoever that was, stabby robber, let's not meet.